Okay, hello everyone. It's a great pleasure to have with us Manos Chatzopoulos. Manos, as you know, did his undergraduate here at the University of Crete in the era before the Institute of Astrophysics was founded. And he had set his mind to doing astronomy, and in particular astronomy in the US. So soon after he graduated, he moved to the University of Texas at Austin, where he did his PhD with Professor Wheeler, an expert on supernova physics and numerical work on simulating complicated explosions. He did extremely well in his PhD, so he got an Enrico Fermi Fellowship to the University of Chicago. So he left the Lone Star State and moved to the Great Midwest. And he was very successful also at the University of Chicago. And upon finishing his postdoc, he had an offer to go to Arizona as a Hubble Fellow or go to Big Easy and as an assistant professor to Louisiana State University. He selected that. And he continued with a very successful career as a junior faculty. And a couple of years ago, he obtained tenure, several awards, NSF Career Award, and so on. But the reason why we have Manos here today is not so much to talk to us about astronomy, but mostly about his side interests, which are also very interesting and successful. And it is his effort to create a company, which he did, and using some of his analytical and numerical skills. So he will talk to us about this company, how it is going, and how one can have both a classical career as a professional astronomer, while in parallel doing something which is relies on these skills, but it's also a bit different. So, Manu, the floor is yours. Thanks a lot for joining us.
Of course, and thank you so much, Vasilis, for the kind introduction, and all of you for being here today, and for accommodating my last-minute request last time to postpone this to May, as I was dealing with a pretty bad stomach bug. So here we are. I'm actually in the East Coast of the United States right now for this week. I'm working remotely from Florida from this week. Which is kind of like the Crete of the United States. So, you know, as somebody who spent a lot of time at the University of Crete, I'm always happy to be at a seaside, sunny place. Like Vasilis said, my background is in computational astrophysics, and over the last I would say about decade, my main interests revolved around trying to model some of the most extreme explosions in the universe, superluminous supernovae and peculiar and luminous transients, by utilizing a lot of numerical computing, a lot of radiation transport methods, hydrodynamics, all of the above, as well as stellar evolution. So a lot of my background lays into building code, maintaining code, testing code, doing code comparison, developing algorithms, and a lot of statistical analysis, because although the bulk of my work is in numerical astrophysics, and as you know, a lot of you here, what are the two most popular codes that astrophysicists use other than Python for data analytics? Fortran and C++. At least back in my day, those were the main numerical frameworks that people used to develop astrophysics software. But over the years, of course, this has changed, and now we have the blessings of the Python programming language that a lot of us are still using. But in addition to that, a lot of what I had to do in my research actually involved the analysis of big data sets. Because some of the simulations that I would run, some of these 3D simulations of supernovae would contain terabytes of data overall. And I would have to write, as you all know, and as many of you probably have done, Python software to analyze, to skim through, lots of data and extract the pieces of information that I wanted to either visualize or analyze further. So big data analysis, as well as a little bit of AI and machine learning, has been part of my career as an astrophysicist. I would like to also point out that I have written a paper utilizing unsupervised machine learning methods like clustering, for example, to analyze supernova light curves. So between the programming experience, the algorithmic development, the numerical astrophysics, and a little bit of AI and machine learning, I had a skill set that I always wanted to use to apply into a more kind of like a practical application. But I would say, like with everything in life, nothing really forces you to pursue something as a necessity. Necessity is the mother of innovation, as you may say. And the story of ParkZen, which is the company that I created, starts during my postdoc years at the University of Chicago. And I don't know if I know that Nick has spent some time in Chicago. I don't know if any of you has been or visited Chicago, but the University of Chicago is in a neighborhood called Hyde Park, towards the south side of the city. And if you have a car, first of all, if you're from Greece, you've never seen temperatures below 20 Fahrenheit below in your life. So imagine somebody like myself who did my undergrad at the University of Crete. Then I moved to sunny, hot Texas, University of Texas at Austin. And then after this academic experience, I had to move for 3 years in one of the coldest cities in the United States, which is nicknamed as the Windy City because it's right next to Lake Michigan. So you get all those very cold wind gusts coming from the lake that are, below freezing quite often during the winter time. And on top of that, I had to drive around for 20 minutes in some cases or more to find a parking spot. And then I wouldn't be able to find a spot, within like a block or short distance from my apartment. So I had to park 5-6 blocks away from where I had to go, and then walk in that cold, this guy from Crete and then Austin had to work in that cold for 20 minutes to get to the apartment. So I thought to myself, this is back in the day was 2015. The problem has actually gotten worse with even more cars in the street and less parking available. But back in 2016, I said to myself, there's got to be a better way to do parking in our time and age. Why is parking such a big problem? And I kind of got fascinated with this problem. And as I dug more into the problem, I did what we often do as scientists. I look up references, I look up papers, and believe it or not, there's journals of transportation and transportation engineering where people are making studies about parking, real peer-reviewed studies about parking. And I started learning a lot about why. I really wanted to find why this is still a problem because it's something that personally affected me. Sometimes I would be late at where I had to go because I wasn't able to locate a parking spot. Sometimes I would, you get frustrated. You have the psychological effect of driving around over and over again, not being able to get to your destination as fast as you wanted to. There is also the increased possibility of accidents. As a matter of fact, some of the studies that I've read regarding the inefficiencies of parking in big cities revolved around the idea of the more time people spend driving in the road, the higher the possibility of getting into a car accident. Therefore, the higher the car insurance cost. A lot of people get into accidents in congested parking lots or trying to find a parking spot and browsing around the neighborhood for a while. So that has a real economic impact. And it also has a huge environmental impact. As it turns out, about a third of the carbon oxygen to emissions are contributed to the atmosphere during the idle browsing that you do around the neighborhood to find a free parking spot. So it's a real problem. A third of the CO2 emissions, a third of the carbon footprint is due to the parking searches in big cities. And then finally, if you add up all the amount of lost hours that people, were late at work or late at their classes or late at a certain activity, if you add it all up and you convert that time into a dollar amount, in the United States, parking inefficiencies are estimated to correspond to about $1.2 billion in productivity loss. So we're talking about a real financial impact into modern society, a real environmental impact, and of course, add all to that to the psychological impact and to a more philosophical way, in a more philosophical way, to the fact that time is precious and you'd rather spend that time reaching your destination and doing the things you love other than just driving around looking for a parking spot, right? So why is parking a problem? So when I put my academic hat on and I tried to answer that question, read some references, it really all boils down to Occam's razor. The explanation is very simple. In some cases, it's a problem because there's simply more cars than real estate. Parking is space, right? A parking space is real estate, is a physical area where, if you have enough space, you can put a car in. If you don't, you cannot put a car in. If you have a lot of cars in the street and limited real estate, parking is going to be a problem. I can't solve that problem because I'm not an architect or I'm not a real estate developer, so I'm not going to build you a new garage or a new parking lot. The second reason why parking is a problem is because people often are lazy. They want to find a space right next to the building. And, I should count myself into this category because I complained earlier about having to park 5 blocks away from my apartment complex and then having to walk in the cold in Chicago to get to my place. But people always, they want convenience. They want to park right next to where they need it. And again, I can't solve that problem either. But the third reason why parking is still a problem in modern societies is lack of advanced information. Is the fact that when you're driving down the street, you do not know a priori, you don't have any information about where a parking space may be available. So you're just driving around blind searching, hoping that somebody's going to leave a spot or you're going to see a free spot down the road. If you had some advanced information about where parking becomes available and where your chances of finding a parking space are higher, then you will be able to at least trim down this parking search time by 50, 60, 70% and make life more efficient for everybody. It's all about allocating space. It's more like an optimization problem. How do I allocate space efficiently as space becomes available for other cars? So that's the math, that's the science problem. And while I was in Chicago as a postdoc, in my free time, in the afternoons, the evenings, in the weekends, that became an obsession to me. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to try to figure out a way to detect where I leave a spot and where I park in real time without utilizing any sort of hardware. Because right now, we have the technology. There is hardware out there that you can put sensors inside a parking lot, or you can put a camera inside a parking lot, and it can count how many cars are parked at any time. Or you could have gates that open up and close and count how many cars go in and out of the lot. Those are great solutions for closed parking spaces, but they're also very expensive and they're not scalable. Some of those systems, they cost $500 per parking space to implement. So those are very expensive systems. So if you want to do something at scale, you cannot use hardware. You cannot use sensors. You have to use something that's cheaper and more scalable. So when I was in Chicago driving, I was trying to think about this a little more, like, how do I make a system? How do I create a system that detects parking in real time when somebody leaves a spot and without utilizing hardware, and B, provide some sort of predictive analytics by utilizing AI, machine learning, data analysis, by solving this optimization problem to provide users with an optimized search route. So instead of you going from browsing around blindly around the block trying to see where somebody else may leave a parking spot, you follow a path that is calculated by an algorithm that maximizes your chances of finding a parking spot. So, of course, when that idea came to my mind, I was not a software engineer that built mobile applications. I knew how to do Fortran, I knew how to do Python, I knew how to do C++, but that's as far as my experience was with programming, thanks to Astrophysics. If I wanted to build something that works with a mobile phone, then there's other languages that I needed to be an expert in. For example, for iPhones, Swift is the language of choice, and for Androids, Objective-C is the language of choice, which I was not familiar with at all. So how do I test my idea? How do I create a minimum viable product, an MVP, without having that knowledge? Then Then I thought to myself, you know what? Post-processing might be a way to do it. Let's just first see if my idea has any merit. So what I did is I downloaded another app that it was a logging application. So all it did, it would log my location, my speed, my acceleration, because modern smartphone devices like the one I'm holding in my hand at the time, they already start having a lot of sensors embedded, which allowed you to calculate how fast a user is going, how much they're accelerating, how much they're decelerating. It allowed you to use GPS to grab their location. It allowed you to use Bluetooth technology to see if they're connected to their car or not. So I'm like, I have enough information between the speed, the acceleration, the movement of the phone. I have enough information to try to see whether I can capture where I park and where I leave a spot in real time by just using my phone in the background without doing anything. Because it's not like you will convince people, to go into their phone before they leave a parking spot and say, hello, everyone, I just left the spot here, go get it. Nobody's going to do it. So I needed to build something that was seamless, that worked in the background, and that it accurately calculated in real time when somebody leaves a parking space and when somebody parks anonymously, but just using their phone. That was the problem that I was trying to solve when I was in Chicago. So like I said, I used this other mobile application, this logging application that would basically collect all this information and will send it to a server. And then all I did I downloaded the data from the server and I post-processed it with a Python code, my very first version of ParkZen, which is the name of our company. I would post-process it in my laptop. So as I was driving around in Chicago, I would keep track with a notebook of the exact time when I parked somewhere and the exact time when I left from somewhere. And I would also keep track of the location. Where did I park? Where did I leave a spot? And then when I would go back home, I would analyze all of that data on my computer with my Python version 0.1 of ParkZen on my laptop and try to see if my algorithm was able to correctly capture exactly when and where I left the spot, exactly when and where I parked, just by using the data that my phone was generating in the background. So I got to a point where it actually got quite accurate. Within a few meters, you would get the location of your car. And within a few seconds, you would know if somebody has left the spot or not. So that was quite good enough. It was a starting point where it motivated me to apply for a program that was offered. It was actually quite young at the time, by the National Science Foundation, the same kind of organization that we astrophysicists in the United States would apply for grants. They had a program called NSF I-Corps, which was specifically designed for academics that wanted to commercialize an idea and to be trained on how to make a business out of a certain idea, how to create a business model. The lean model canvas, the lean business canvas was the word of the day that everybody was using back in those days. So they would train you with seminars. They would bring in entrepreneurs, academics that became successful entrepreneurs. They would bring in people from the business school to teach you some skills relating to taking this idea, taking this technology, and trying to actually see whether it's commercializable. Because everything is a great idea. We can have fun with a bunch of ideas, but it really becomes commercializable the moment that somebody is willing to pay money for it. That's really the breaking point, that that you got something in your hands when it comes to startups. So I applied to this NSF program. I got accepted. I got into the program, and that program came with a $10,000 grant. So they give you $10,000 to build a prototype of your idea and create a business model, which at the time was more than enough. I was at the University of Chicago. The University of Chicago is actually very well known for its business school. It's one of the best business schools in the United States, the Chicago Booth School. And they have one of the largest university-based incubators in the United States, the New Venture Challenge. So they take entrepreneurship very seriously, and they have a lot of resources and a lot of famous professors / entrepreneurs to help you out with your idea and advise you along the way. So that leads me to the first piece of news that I would like to share here. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen to show you a few things. So this is an article by the University of Chicago's newspaper, the Chicago Maroon, which, as you can see here, that's May 10, 2016, um, announces the fact that myself and one computer science student, senior undergraduate at the University of Chicago, which I had to reach out and find. I had to post ads. I had to put up papers, and ads, job ads in the computer science department. I had to send emails. It wasn't easy finding those software engineers. They tend to be a little spoiled because, they get paid very well from the industry and they don't really want to work for free. But this person was really excited about this project. So I partnered up with this software engineer and we built this MVP using the money that we got from the NSF ICO program. And then on top of that, we participated into the New Venture Challenge, which is the big startup competition that's organized by the University of Chicago Booth School of Business. So when we got into this competition, we had a nice MVP that was working, a nice idea, some cool technology that did not exist, right? But we also had a business model at that time, thanks to the I-Corps program, the NSF program that I was talking about earlier. And the business program revolved around what we call B2C, business to consumer product. Our basic idea is it was very, let's just say, optimistic, right? We're like, we're going to solve parking for everyone in Chicago, in New York, in Miami, in all the big cities. Everyone will be able to find parking easier thanks to our technology. So the whole problem with this idea is that obviously you need to have a large user base. You need a lot of people to at least download the mobile app. Even if the mobile app is terminated, it doesn't matter, it still works. To be able to generate enough real-time data within the city, you need high enough population density, user density within a neighborhood, within a city, to be able to help people effectively find parking with this technology. So while we got into that competition, and we actually made it all the way to the finals, we're on the top 3 finalists at the competition. We didn't win the big prize, which came with, I think back in the day, was $50,000 because people had concerns about how we can commercialize it and make it successful if we rely on a large number of downloads. So that story happened. We got a little bit of more visibility from local media at the city of Chicago. There's a magazine called Chicago Inno, directed towards innovation that starts at the city of Chicago. And as you can see here, they also created an article for us. ParkZen will find you free street parking using an algorithm developed by an astrophysicist. So after that happened, I got an offer, like Vasily said, to be a professor at Louisiana State University. So I moved out from Chicago, came back into the South, relocated to Baton Rouge. I spent the first 2 years, obviously, being focused at building my group and building my my research projects at LSU as a young professor, because obviously you're on the clock, you're on the tenure clock, so you got to be productive, you got to produce papers, you got to bring grants. That went very well. We over the first 2 years, I was fortunate to bring in about $1.2 million of federal grants to the university, grow my group, and also produce a lot of publications and simulations. But in the back of my mind, I was still bothered that I didn't work harder into pursuing this idea. And what was the next pivotal point into this idea was actually realizing that, wait a second, I'm in a big university campus with 36,000 students and 10,000 staff faculty members. So it's almost like a small city with 50 plus parking lots and garages where parking is a nightmare. One of the top 3 complaints of university students in the United States about campus life is about parking. And the problem is pretty much the same. Oh, I can't find a parking spot when I need it. Oh, I was late in my exam in my class because I couldn't find a parking spot. Oh, I risked parking illegally and I got a ticket because I couldn't find a parking spot. So I realized that, wait a second, obviously parking is a problem everywhere, but here we have a controlled environment, the university campus, where people come in and out every day. The university community has mobile apps that they use. They have a campus app already. They have an athletics app. And on top of that, you have an organized parking operation. There are professionals. And believe it or not, there is a degree you can get in parking, which is called CCAP, Certified Professional Public Parking, that are managing those. We're talking about 10, 20, 30-person teams that are managing parking operations at the university. So they have a whole department that manages the parking operations, something that, of course, I was really not familiar with when I lived in Greece. There's no such a thing, right? You go to the University of Crete, you can literally park anywhere you want. Parking is not a problem. But in the United States, they got on the big universities dedicated parking professionals to help organize parking. So I'm like, you know what? That is actually a great environment to jumpstart this idea again. And I also thought this is more viable as a business model. So instead of going B2C, business to consumer, which was the original idea that I had in Chicago, I had to pivot. And pivoting is quite, as you probably know, a very regular path in an entrepreneur's career. You have to dynamically adjust to the conditions and respond to what the market needs and what is more viable. So I'm like, you know what? Probably creating this idea as a B2B model, business to business, more accurately is B2B2C, business to consumer, because in the end, you're also going to have some end users in the app, right? That would be a more viable business model, because I could sell this to university campuses, to airports, to shopping malls, to hospitals, to all controlled, organized parking environments where parking congestion is an issue, and they need to help their constituents, their customers, their students, the persons, their employees find parking faster. So I started engaging into that again. I reached out to the computer science department at Louisiana State University. I partnered up with some very brilliant computer science students. And one of them is still with us, actually, running the company with me and helping out with the technical development. And I also reached out to the Department of Parking. And, you know, I've met a lot of wonderful people in astrophysics. I didn't know what to expect when I got into the parking industry, right? From supernova to the parking lots, who would expect? I like to always joke and say that, you know, parking is also a black hole in a way. You know, you could get lost looking for parking. But I got connected with Department of Parking and Transportation Director, Mr. Brian Favela, which was at LSU at the time. And I created a little team, a little advisory board, if you want to call it that way, to investigate the possibility of building out my technology as a mobile application and launching it at LSU. I was at the perfect place to do that because LSU had obvious problems with parking. Students were complaining. There was a lot of parking facilities. There was a lot of people that are already using apps provided by the university, so you could tag along into that user base to test out this idea and see if it's viable in an environment like a university campus. So we spent about 2 years building out the technology, optimizing it, adding more features to it, making sure that it's even more accurate than it was before. And let me tell you a secret that you probably already know. When you're building a mobile app, functionality is great, solving a problem is great, but in the end of the day, what can make it or break it is the user experience and the user interface. Users the want, and that is why Apple is such a successful company, because the iPhone is very intuitive. You can literally be a first-time user of an iPhone and figure it out within the first day, right? So if you're building an app for parking, you have to get into the brain of the driver. What does the average person think when they're driving around the university campus looking for a parking spot? Well, first of all, they have to keep their eyes on the road, right? They cannot spend, you know, several minutes staring at a map on their phone, trying to figure out what that map says. So you got to build something that's very intuitive and very fast at giving you the information that you need. So you have to go into, vicariously go through this user's journey, right? So we started developing a user interface, our first version of the ParkZen mobile application for iOS and Android. It took us 2 years. I like to say this is a company that was built in my 2010 Ford Fusion, which is the car I had at the time, because me and my developer, we had to drive around for hours and hours on end and test. And he was sitting right next to me with his laptop coding while we're driving around campus to make sure that we address any bugs or any problems, and we further optimize our algorithm, that we cover all the edge cases. Because if you think about it, it's not easy to capture accurately that information without using any hardware and any input by the user, just using their phone. What if you're stopped in traffic for a while? Do you count as somebody parked there if they're stopped for a while in traffic? What if you stopped at the red light? You have to eliminate all these errors and all these edge cases to make sure that your system is accurate enough. So it took us a while. It took us about approximately 1.5 to 2 years to come to a place where we're like, you know what? We're confident to launch this right now at Louisiana State University. So at this point, this is exactly what we did. With the help, and this is the new, this is the official announcement that came out March 21st, 2022, when we first launched the ParkZen app at the university, Louisiana State University. Here's a short video.
ParkZen is a free app that helps you find parking spots on LSU's campus. Created by an LSU professor and student, the app uses the power of smart crowdsourcing to check parking availability in real time. Once you download ParkZen, the app only asks for your location while on campus and does not track your history or personal data. Then, using the phone's connection to the car's Bluetooth and processing the user's smartphone motion and activity data while only on campus, it notifies the user when someone is leaving a spot and gives you directions. The ParkZen map gives users an estimate of the number of cars parked in lots around campus through color, ranging from green to yellow to orange or red. And if you can't remember where you parked, the app can tell you that too. The parking spots are updated in real time, so the more drivers who use the app, the better the parking experience will be.
So of course, in typical fashion at Louisiana State, we had to use our mascot, Mike the Tiger, which proved out to be a very successful marketing campaign. So it wasn't just the business component. It wasn't just building the mobile application, testing it. We needed to get this thing out to the hands of a lot of students. And you do not need everyone on campus to use the app to get an accurate assessment of parking throughout campus. You just need a critical mass. So we needed to spend the first 2 weeks when we launched this product to make sure that enough students knew about it, enough students downloaded it. And over the first couple of weeks, we got more than 6,000 downloads, which was more than enough to get us pretty good data in a lot of the most congested parking lots around the LSU campus. So now that was another pivotal moment in my experience as an academic entrepreneur, because that's the moment when your idea, something that you had in your brain a few years ago, is now in the hands of real people. And if you think referees of papers that you submit for publication are brutal, the end users are even more brutal. Like they're gonna be very, very harsh on your app. If they don't like a feature, if the app crashes, if they don't find a parking spot, they can be very brutal, write you the worst review on the App Store. And if you have pretty bad reviews on the App Store, that has a big impact on the ability of your app to scale. So of course, that was a nerve-wracking moment when the cat was out of the box and we start seeing those download numbers going up and up every day. We're like, oh, let's see what happens next. This is the moment of make it or break it. But as it turns out, it actually went well, and especially in areas where there were more problems, like the bigger parking lots, commuter lots, or lots around residence halls or around athletic facilities. We got a lot of data from those lots, and we also got some really good feedback from a lot of end users, as well as the Department of Parking and Transportation. So building on this success, we're like, you know what? We should try to raise some money and see if we can make a business out of it. Because again, without money, unfortunately, without capital, you cannot build out a business. You cannot hire the right people. You cannot support a software product. A software product needs continuous maintenance, support, updates. You need salespeople to sell it. I wasn't a salesperson, but of course, then I start thinking, you know what? I actually do sales every day. If you think about it, when you walk into that classroom and you try to inspire young people to become passionate in astrophysics, essentially you're selling astrophysics to them in a way. So I'm like, you know what? Maybe I have some skills as a salesman too. And you need people to support your customers. So it is an expensive enterprise. You need capital to run a business. So the next step for me after this success was, how do we build on that, and how do we raise some money? As it turned out, there was a competition in the city of Baton Rouge, the capital region where LSU is located, called Brew. Not Brew the beer, but Baton Rouge Entrepreneurship Week, where startups from across the state compete for a $100,000 prize. And I decided to take part in that competition. We made it through the first phase. We made it through the second phase. And eventually we made it to the finals. So it was just us and two other companies fighting for the top prize of $100,000 to start the business. And luckily, we were the ones who won it. So that was another pivotal moment, March 12, 2022, in the history of our company. This is the moment where I had to go on stage, and it was kind of like a Shark Tank environment, right? Where I had to go on stage and answer pretty tough questions from a panel of judges and the audience, and convince them that our idea is not just cool, it's not just a cool technology, it doesn't just solve a real problem, but it's something that can make money to investors. You have to convince people that there will be a return in their investment in order for them to give you money. So we were fortunate to win this competition. That was, I would say, one of a very important milestone in the history of the company. And with this capital now, we had some money. Believe it or not, $100,000 is not a lot of money for a company. It burns through very fast, especially if you have to hire software engineers. Software engineers are very expensive. So we had to make sure we allocate this capital very smartly so that we can get the maximum results out of this. So we spent some money, hiring more student developers. We spent some money hiring a salesperson, actually an LSU graduate from business school, Sam. And we spent some money, believe it or not, going to parking conferences. So before I entered this world, I was only familiar with astrophysics conferences in exotic locations. I had no idea that parking has 6 major conferences every year in the United States. So I'm like, that's interesting. Let's go to a parking conference. And of course, it's actually a very vibrant and a very dynamic industry. There's a lot of need for technology. There's a lot of need for innovation. And parking professionals and vendors get together at least 6 times a year in major conferences to talk to each other. And that's a great opportunity for you, if you're a company, to present your product to this community. So we started going to the trade shows and these conferences, and we actually started getting our first real customers. And people start showing interest. And what made our solution interesting for universities and airports and some municipalities was the fact that it was completely hardware free. That was the big sell of this idea. It was the fact that if you're a university campus with 50 parking lots, you do not have the money, you do not have the resources to install hardware to count spaces in real time for all of your lots. You might do that investment for 1 garage or 2 garages or 2 lots, but you're gonna have zero information from everywhere else. Also, you do not have a way to efficiently convey that information back to your community, your students, your faculty, your staff, and help them actually find parking. And on top of that, it's not just helping your community find parking, it's helping your community navigate the rules of parking, because there's parking rules, as you know, helping your students being more compliant So we built a feature where it's pretty cool. If you're a student and you park in an area that you're not allowed to park in, you will get a push notification notifying you to move your car so you don't get a citation. So we built more features as this product grew from finding parking to even more things, right? Another cool feature we created was, what if I drive into a parking lot and there's a major pothole, right? Or an infrastructure problem. I can take a picture of it, and then this picture goes to parking and transportation and gets reported, and they can fix it. Or what if parking and transportation wants to convey updates regarding parking on campus to the end users? So we built a system where parking and transportation can go in and say, do not park on this lot tomorrow at 7 a.m. because there's going to be construction. And then your parkers know it in advance, so they don't even bother going to park in this lot. So it started as helping people find parking on campus, and then it evolved to adding even more and more of value enhancing features over time. And that's something that really helped. And that's a very important aspect of being an entrepreneur, is the ability to navigate and try to adjust to what the market needs and try to keep constantly improving your product. It's all about taking feedback in and addressing that feedback in real time. It can be very daunting and it can be very tiring and very stressful, but in the end of the day, it really pays off. So we started having our first customers in 2023. We started partnering up with some big companies, as a matter of fact. So there's companies that make this hardware. Some of you may have seen it. If you go into a garage, there's those lights, the green and the red lights on top of each spot that will tell you where space is available. Again, that's a great technology, but it's very expensive. It costs $550 per parking space to install that system in a garage. So if you have a garage of 1,000, 10,000 spaces, that cost adds up very much. And then you have to maintain this hardware because it breaks. Hardware breaks, so you always have to pay maintenance costs. So it's a great solution, but it's also very expensive. However, these companies, they saw value in working with us because they were able to go out and their customers and say, you know what, just use my system in one of your garages and I'll get you ParkZen, our partner, to give you some information on parking in the rest of the areas where you're not gonna install hardware. And we're gonna give you an app, and we're gonna give you a dashboard where you can do data analytics, which is, by the way, one of my favorite things that we do at ParkZen is we use AI and machine learning to predict future parking availability based on historical data that we collect. So there is a lot of machine learning involved into this parking finding kind of solution that we offer. And of course, we do a lot of statistical analysis, kind of like business intelligence or consulting to the parking operators. We can provide them with data, real-time data, historical data that shows them how parking changes throughout their facilities over time to help them organize their operations in a way that maximize efficiency and help their customers better. So there's many aspects, many tentacles that grew out of the original ParkZen idea. And over the last few months, we got even more publicity. This is an article from October 2nd, 2023. This is the Prime newspaper in the capital region here in Louisiana, in Baton Rouge. It's an article about our company. Since we got investment, we also had more investments come in. We had some high net worth individuals that wanted to participate into the company. So they gave us another $100,000. So since our inception up until now, we've raised a total of $360,000 from private investors. And we are at the point right now where our team, we got 2 full-time developers, 1 part-time developer, 1 full-time salesperson, myself, my co-founder, and we need more people because we have 10 paying customers. And that's another thing that I really want to emphasize. Another pivotal moment in your career as an entrepreneur is the moment that you get your first check. I almost wanted to frame that on my wall because this is really the validation. This is somebody telling you, you know what, I don't just think your idea is cool. I'm actually going to pay for it and use it. That is really where everything starts breaking through. If you can make that step, then you're really on a good path to growth. And then you have to be a sustained growth. That's the next challenge. Okay, fine. There is demand. There is customers that want to use our product, but can we sustain it at a rate where we make more money than we take in? You need to create a sustainable and scalable business model. This is what the investors love to hear. Sustainable, scalable, 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 scalable. How do you make your idea worth $1 million, $2 million, $3 million, $10 million down the road? So this is the challenge where we're at right now, is how do we take this to the next step? And we're at this very, very kind of like tough spot in a way, where on one side, we have customers that we serve, we have money coming in from these customers, but on the other side, we still have to pay our developers, which are very expensive, our salespeople, our personnel, subscriptions, software services. So we still spend more money than we take in, which is the typical life of a startup company, right? In the beginning, we always spend more money than you take in. And the next inflection point for us is actually the news that I got Monday, just 2 days ago. And I might even have the paperwork today. So maybe a lucky day that I got to speak to you today, that a big investor based in North Carolina, a venture capitalist group called Co-Founders Capital, is going to be investing $1.2 million into ParkZen, enabling us to grow our team, enabling us to hire more developers, to actually get office space, and to grow this to the next level. So that's really our big opportunity to make this idea a successful company, and hopefully get to a point where it's worth 10, 20, $30 million, where we can exit within 3 or 4 years and take the cash out. Because I want to emphasize here that with all this work, all this sweat, all this effort the last few years, personally, the founders, they've made $0. $0. Now, the moment of glory, the moment that we get rewarded is when this idea is worth $1, $2, $3, $4 million, and we sell it to a bigger company. This is when the big payout comes. So hopefully this $1.2 million that we raised is going to help us get to that point in the next 2 or 3 years. It could also fail. There's always the possibility of failing, right, when it comes to business. And it's actually, I like to say, a little harder than in some cases than doing a PhD in astrophysics, because when you do a PhD in astrophysics, you are working with a scientific method and a structure, and you're looking for tangible results that you can compare against, for example, observations. In business, again, you could have a great solution, you could have a great product, but you can never predict whether the customer, the end user, the client is going to use you and keep using you in the future. You can never predict the psychology of the end user. You rely on marketing, things that are very hard to constrain, right? You rely on adoption, you rely on people's appetite for your product. So that can be very hard to overcome, and that's where you need to build a successful marketing and sales team to get this to the hands of as many users as possible. So that's where we are right now with ParkZen. It's a very exciting moment for us to take this next step. Luckily, even though this takes a lot of my time, I still been able to be productive and support my group and get more grants and keep doing my astrophysics work. Between the two of those things that I juggle, I don't get necessarily the most sleep. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night because it can be very stressful, running a small company. It's not just about, obviously the profits and the product. It's about the fact that you now have a team you have to support. It's like having graduate students and postdocs. You have employees that you have to support. You have to make sure they're also able to be successful within the company and grow with the company. And you have to navigate those relationships. So it can be quite challenging, but in the end of the day, there's something very rewarding about, thinking back, having the seed of an idea in your mind because it was an annoying problem for you, and then coming to a point where you have the opportunity to pursue that as a real business with private investors investing large amounts of money, believing in you, believing in your team, believing in your product, and hoping that this can become something big. So it's been an exciting journey. I highly recommend, if you have this entrepreneur bug, pursue it. There's nothing you lose. It's a fun journey. Even if it doesn't work out financially, you actually learn a lot of things along in the process. I feel like that I grew as a person. I feel like I grew as a scientist. I feel like I grew as an entrepreneur, obviously, by going through this journey. And it kind of enables you to break out of the bubble, right? Where everybody thinks the same way as we do. Because let's be honest, the average academic, the average business person, they don't really see each other eye to eye. They don't really, there's not too much of a crossover. It's actually very productive to bring those communities together, because each one of those communities brings a different skill into the table, and it helps you open up your mind to new possibilities laying ahead. So I highly recommend you pursue that dream. You have a lot of valuable skills being an astrophysicist that a lot of other professions do not have. Your programming, AI, machine learning skills, the statistical analysis, data analysis skills, they are in very high demand right now, both from startup innovative companies and other industries. So you're in a very unique position to pursue this and make your own dreams happen, and pursue your own business. One last thing I want to say here before I close out is that the logo that we're still using, and let me quickly go to our website here. That's another thing that I want to credit the University of Crete with. So here is our company's logo here on the left. ParkZen is a little human that will make your parking experience more zen, more peaceful. Is actually designed by a dear friend of mine who is also an astrophysics graduate student at the University of Crete, and an Erasmus student before that, Paolo Bonfini. I don't know if Paolo is with us today, but if you know Paolo, he's also great with graphic design, and he is the one that designed our logo that we're still using. So there's a little bit of University of Crete, more University of Crete influence regarding this company. So anyways, I'd like to stop here and see if you have any questions. Thank you so much for the opportunity to talk to you about this experience, and I hope you found it fun.
Thank you very much, Mano, for this really exciting presentation of everything that you do in your ample free time as a tenure faculty at LSU. Maybe someone, I don't know if any of the people have a question, but before I possibly ask something, if you do, please raise your hand. I don't see one, but let me then go ahead. Oh, Nick, sorry. Nick, you go ahead and ask if you. I see your hand is raised.
Unmute, yes. Mano, excellent talk, and congratulations on a beautiful idea and for the implementation of it. I wish you every success. So maybe students in the audience or postdocs may have the question that, what about your university? Is it asking you for any money, or do you feel that you should donate some of your earnings when they come to your university? What is happening? What is the situation regarding to, a professor makes a big company, becomes millionaire, so a part of it is mine?
That's a very good question. I'm glad you brought it up. And that's something I intended to talk about, but I never got to. So universities in the United States, they have what they call technology transfer offices. So when a faculty member, a full-time faculty member, or the student develops an idea, a business idea within the university has rights to the IP of this idea. And the way it works, at least for
what's the IP? What's the IP?
Intellectual property.
Okay, yeah, don't use buzzwords because we don't know them.
Fair enough. Sorry about that. Yeah, I find myself using a lot of those lately. But
okay.
yeah, the intellectual property is basically co-owned by the inventors, in this case myself, and the university. And you have to go through a process called licensing. And through this licensing process with the university, you have to come into an agreement with the university about what their rights and privileges to the technology is. So, you can think of it, Nick, as a negotiation, where they come to the table and they say, we want X amount of your company or X amount of your earnings, and then you go back and say, well, can we work with something else? And that was actually a very daunting process, to tell you the truth. It took us about 2 to 3 months to negotiate this, because originally the university was asking for 20% of the company, 4% of the earnings, which doesn't sound like much, but for investors, this is actually allergic to them, because essentially the university wouldn't share the same amount of risk as the investor that puts $1.2 million in would share. The university would always get their payout, no matter what, no matter how ParkZen is doing, they'll always get 4%, 6%, 5% plus equity, but the investor could lose $1.2 million. So we had to go back and forth a little bit with them, but they were we ended up in a very reasonable place right now, where the university, the Louisiana State, is going to own 1% of the company, and we're going to pay them upfront $180,000 for the privilege of using this technology in perpetuity. So that is actually it's a big win for us and the university, because if this company succeeds and sells, let's just say it sells for, I don't know, 100 million, if things go very well, then 1% of this will go to LSU directly. In addition to that, LSU in general encourages their faculty to be innovative, to commercialize ideas. So, and that's the other thing that's very important, that signing this licensing deal with the university that we came to an agreement with enables me to keep doing it with the university support and encouragement, which is another important thing.
Okay, so that sounds very good. Yeah.
I'm actually curious if a professor develops a commercializable idea at the University of Crete, is there a mechanism about the ownership of the intellectual property as well, or how does that work at the University of Crete?
I don't know anything about it.
I don't know the answer for the university, but at Fourth, there is this Praxis network. I think you discussed a bit with Carnuras a couple of years ago. And typically, and this is something negotiable, because it depends on the type of the company, right? On the risk associated, the potential revenue, there are some guidelines, I think, at least based on the European Union experience, on what typically happens what is the market value or the appropriate thing. I think something in the order of 6%, I think, from the profit is something that it is. I think this is sort of like a magic number that I remember.
It's like a royalty.
Also, yeah, like a royalty. But it also depends, as you mentioned, on the type of the company, how exactly infrastructure of the research center was used to develop this idea, or was it something that was sort of like did not involve any sort of like experiments that were done, or labs that were used in order for you to formulate it. So I think in general it is, at least when it comes to Fourth, people are sort of like, the structure is fairly reasonable, and there is funding not from Astrophysics, but the Computer Science Institute and the Institute of Electronic Structure and Laser in particular, where the institute actually supports patent development, so that the researcher will not have to put their own money. And then if the institute or Fourth invests, then there is some deals which are done along this way.
I'm assuming, especially with applied sciences that are happening at Fourth, there's probably a lot of spin-offs that are coming out of there, because
there are a number of ones, right? I mean, in addition to ForthNet, that you know very well, that made a lot of people wealthy, and Fourth in particular, right? Because when it became public, the more recent one is it's called, I think, Orama VR, which is a virtual reality company based in Switzerland, which enables you to use sort of like virtual reality technology to train medical doctors to do operations, right? Sort of like works on the cloud. And it was recently bought by Cisco.
Oh, wow.
And and Cisco plans to invest on that, right? So there are, the signal processing lab, for example, they developed some patent software that was bought by, I think it was Amazon, to use it for Alexa type of activities, right? So it's audio compression and sort of like voice recognition type of thing. So there are cases like that. If there is if no one else has a question, I would like to ask. I mean, you explain very nicely, sort of like the transition from a physical problem that you had, and based on your skills, how you started coding and developing your product, right? But you also mentioned two things. First, that it was the business aspect in which you had no formal training. Then there was a legal aspect on how to set things up, select your partners and collaborators, but at the same time in a structure that could protect your original idea, right?
Right.
And then trying to commercialize the. If you were to go back, right? Is it? Do you think that? I don't know if you invested some of your own money to obtain legal advice, for example, or would you have done it differently if you were starting again, right? Because now you have the experience and you saw the pitfalls, right?
Definitely, yeah. We made mistakes along the way, and we've learned from the mistakes because, like you said, we weren't. It's the first time we weren't trained into this stuff, especially with illegal paperwork. One has to be very careful. You can't just swing it and use templates from online or other companies. Everything is just different from each company, and in a way, it kind of irritates me how lawyers have created a world where you need them to survive because they need to draft everything and they're very expensive. Here in the United States, if you want a decent lawyer for your company, you have to pay them $400-500 an hour. So that can be a big strain on your company's finances. So we kind of swing in the beginning when we put together our first agreements, with founders agreements and things like that. Of course, luckily, we were able to fix a lot of that down the road when we raised money and we actually had lawyers take a look into those things and make corrections. But I would definitely say if you're starting a company, have your legal, if you can support it yourself, if you have your own money, I highly recommend investing that money, even though it can be a little straining, because it can save you from a lot of more expenses and trouble later on. So if we had done our homework on the legal stuff early on, Vasilis would probably save a few $1,000s later on in legal costs. So that's definitely something that you need to look into. The other thing you have to think about is the structure of the company. I do not remember the types of companies that we have in Greece. EDEC, I don't remember, but in the US, there's, as you know, LLCs, Louisiana limited liability companies. There's S corps, C corps. There's different kinds of structures, and depending on how you set your company, you get different types of protections, legal protections, but you also get different types of tax incentives. For example, and I do believe that trying to navigate taxes as a small business, for us, it was very important. I mean, we saved thousands of dollars being a small business, setting up an address at what they call opportunity zones in the United States, where you get tax credits. Now, you might think that you're trying to avoid tax and all that, but $10,000 can make or break the company. Can help you pay your employees for another 2 months, which could be the lifeline for a small company. So navigating early on as you're a small company, those local laws, the tax laws, it's another thing that I highly recommend you do some homework on before you set something up.
Thank you very much. So I don't see any hands raised. People were intimidated by you, Mano, but I think no, I think it's a great example on how one can balance things between astronomy research and teaching, as well as doing something fun and potentially profitable and useful for the community. I think that part we should never forget, that if a company does well, it's because, as you mentioned, that people who will actually pay their money and they put the money in the pocket find that this product or this service is worth it. So
they are the absolute
I think,
referee when it comes to that.
So I think I would like personally to congratulate you for
Thank you.
working on another aspect of the American dream. And when you will become millionaire, because that's, I'm certain that you will set up a Manos Chatzopoulos PhD fellowship here in Crete, where graduate students are not getting paid that well, but fellowship can actually make the dreams of a young astronomer come to fruition, possibly as successfully as yours. So thanks again for
well, thank you,
your
Vasilis. And actually, joking aside, you know, talking in private conversations with my wife, I said, you know, if this thing flies and, you know, it becomes successful, that's definitely one thing I want to do, actually. So it's not like you said it as a joke, but that's something I've thought about.
Okay. Thank you very much. If no one else has an urgent question, let's congratulate Manos again. Manos, as you know, is also a affiliated faculty here at the Institute of Astrophysics, so he visits us in a semi-regular basis. So I'm sure we'll have him from nearby, either later this summer or sometime next year.
I'll be there in the summer.
Yeah.
So I look forward to seeing you in person. Thank you so much. Good to see everyone.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Mano.
Bye-bye.
Bravo,
Bye,
Mano,
everyone.
bravo, bravo.
Ευχαριστώ, Νίκο. Ευχαριστώ πολύ. Καλή συνέχεια. Καλό απόγευμα.
Καλό
Καλό
απόγευμα.
απόγευμα, Μάνο.